welcome to our last Bonded Book Club discussion video of Hidden Figures. I'm so happy that you've joined us today and that you're reading the books along with us. Hidden Figures was such a fantastic book to read, such a important story to tell that it's just as important to be discussing it with people that read it and are reading along with us and watching the movie even, which I've been making myself read the book so I can go watch the movie, so now I'm really pumped about doing that. Okay, so our last two questions start off with this one. Question 9. Ironically, the integration of the West computers with the rest of the computing section meant a demolition for its supervisor, Dorothy Vaughn. Quote, despite knowing for many years that this day would eventually come and having done everything within her power to bring it about, the victory she savored was bittersweet. Progress for the group meant a step back for its leader. Dorothy's career as a manager came to an end on the last day of the West Computing area office. What does this say about the nature of progress? How would you have felt if you had been Dorothy? So this just like sucks all around, basically, is how I feel about it. Dorothy was kind of dealt a double blow. So in her efforts to bring about progress for her fellow Black women, she was dealt a second blow because she knew that she would never get to be a manager anytime soon because she's a woman, and that the white men would never want a woman or a Black woman to be managing any of them. So she had this period of time where she was afforded this great authority, but it was very limited and only in this really specialized area. And even though she devoted her career to bringing about equality and change within the workplace for Black women, this was something she saw coming and knew that it was inevitable. So even more frustrating was that for her, she was competent enough to do the job. She'd been doing the job as a manager, as a mathematician for over a decade when she lost that position due to changes coming about in the workforce, allowing Black women to be integrated into all aspects of NASA, which was great and wonderful, but it also meant that she was going to be losing her managerial position. It definitely feels to me like the white men that she worked with were not ready. She definitely was ready and capable of doing this work, of being a leader, of continuing to be a leader in NASA. And the fact that she was in a leadership role for so long and then it was taken away from her 15, 20 years into her service is just really hard to fathom. In many ways, she was the sacrificial lamb. She put in the hours, the years, and never received the accolades that she deserved. At some point, she started researching and publishing, but even a lot of her research was still published under other men's names. So yeah, Dorothy was one of the characters who really never got to see her name come to its full fruition publicly like so many of her colleagues did, which was really frustrating. If I was in her position, I would have felt incredibly demotivated and honestly devastated. That's why I'm so amazed by her, is that even though she lost her leadership position, she continued to go to work and continued to research and continued to give it her all. I think in part because she knew that she had to, like this was that important, but she also loved it. Like she loved math, she loved doing the research. This was part of who she was, and so she was going to continue to put one foot in front of the other, which was just incredible to me. All right, our last question starts the quote. Being on the leading edge of integration was not for the faint of heart. Margot Lee Shetterly observes, do you think the women of West Computing were unusually courageous? Did they arrive there because they were brave, or did they grow braver as they faced the challenges of working at Langley and living under Jim Crow? I think it's both. It seemed to me, reading about the women who came to work at Langley and who really stayed there for a long time and made careers out of this, that they were a special type of person. They were incredibly driven, undistracted, very focused, and able not to take things personally that they had every right to take personally, having to do with their gender and their race. They really let things roll off their back and focus their efforts on each other and the work at hand. So I think that that is a really important component of this. But living under Jim Crow also lent a hand in these women becoming braver, in part because I think people became so frustrated. They became so frustrated at being limited in every aspects of their lives, whether it was going to the bathroom, going to get lunch at a restaurant, trying to find housing for their families that was affordable. So yeah, I think that part of it was personality. I think part of it was frustration, which, you know, potentially turned into bravery at some point. But yeah, they also, and on top of that, they were a specific type of person who could grind for so long, for so many decades at something without ever needing any kind of outside validation. That's what amazes me, is that they were able to do some of the most challenging work that is out there and not get an atta girl, not an atta boy, an atta girl ever. Until they were gone from NASA. So most of their careers were spent validating themselves and knowing that they were good enough and smart enough and they needed to be there and that their work was, you know, important. So yeah, I think it was a combination of personality and growing braver as time passed and as they grew more confident in themselves. So it was a little bit of everything, I think. So I wanted to share with you my, probably most unimportant observation from Hidden Figures, now that we're done with our discussion questions. So I've concluded from this book that these women are obviously incredible, amazing, women that we should be learning about in our history classes when we're in high school, and it did not happen obviously, but we should, and we need to be thinking about them and honoring them and holding them up as our celebrities because they are incredible. On a completely unrelated note, reading this book reminded me how dangerous the work they were partaking in and how it was such uncharted territory. They didn't really know what was necessarily going to happen. Of course they knew somewhat what was going to happen, but there are so many little variables that can happen when you're shooting somebody into the air. I was amazed at the fact that we did not have any comprehension of flight patterns. So, I don't know, I always remember the movie Top Gun, how when Maverick and Goose fly into someone's air flight pattern, something bad happened and they crashed their plane. Okay, Katherine Johnson was the person who did the research on this and really nailed down that idea that there needed to be flight patterns and air traffic controllers so that all of our planes didn't run into each other. That was not until the 1950s. So we went through both civil wars, people flying around in the air, not knowing anything about flight patterns, planes just falling out of the sky for decades and us not knowing anything. So thank you, Katherine Johnson, for figuring that out. That's real serious. Okay, on top of that, John Glenn. John Glenn is an adrenaline junkie. He's probably a very smart adrenaline junkie, but he was definitely an adrenaline junkie. The fact that he was willing, with the amount of knowledge that we had at the time when we sent him into orbit, to get in a little capsule and be shot off into space, knowing pretty full well that he's probably going to die. Seriously, I guess the practice runs they had all failed pretty much before they shot him into orbit. And he was like, it's cool, just shoot me up there, it's fine. I was amazed at how much the people who worked at NASA and who worked on all of these research projects and space and learning about all this, how willing they were to put their lives on the line for that. So that is just pretty amazing, and also how little we knew and how willing people were to sign up to be shot into space. with that knowledge. That was pretty amazing for me to find out. Just wow. So anyways, that was my side note observation. John Glenn is insane basically, but you know what? Kudos to you, dude. You know, more power to you. All right, so thank you so much for joining us for our Hidden Figures discussion. It has been a great book. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments. There's so much more we could have discussed about this book. But I hope that we hit some of the big themes. And I hope you'll join us next month, March, for our next Bonded Book Club read, which is going to be I'm Judging You by Lovey Ajayi. And it is going to be a completely different type structure, a little bit more similar to Bad Feminist. Essays, hilarious, lots of things to have strong opinions on. So I think the discussion for that one will be really entertaining and really, really fun. So go ahead and order your book, and we will see you next month for our next Bonded Book Club discussion.